Former President Trump continued to push his false claims that the 2020 election was stolen at a campaign event for Arizona Republican gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake on Friday. He also mocked the January 6th committee hearings, which have included testimony that the former president attacked a Secret Service agent in an attempt to reach Capitol grounds on that day. Here's a bit of what he said.
I grabbed the wheel, but I was rebuffed. And instead my hands went to the throat or something of the other Secret Service. Now this guy lifts like 300 pounds or 350. And he's a great tough guy. But think of it, what person would, I'm the President of the United States. And can you imagine this made-up story?
Former Vice President Mike Pence also hit the campaign trail in Arizona on Friday, but for Kari Lake's opponent, Karrin Taylor Robson. Both Pence and Trump are making several appearances this week. Here to break down all of this is Colby Itkowitz. She's a political reporter for The Washington Post. Colby, it's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So explain the significance of Arizona and this Trump-Pence dynamic. It's pretty remarkable that the former vice president is campaigning for the person that the former president has not endorsed.
Especially to see that in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Arizona is a very important swing state. It's a one that President Biden won narrowly. And so Trump has a lot of anger about Arizona and the fact that he thinks that is one of the states where the election was stolen from him. And so to have Mike Pence go there and support a candidate who's basically has said, let's move forward. Maybe there were irregularities in the voting, but I don't believe the election was rigged, versus the person Trump's endorsed, Kari Lake, who has basically spent the last 2 years spreading this big lie about the 2020 election.
And Colby, we're also seeing the former vice president taking additional steps to distance himself from Trump. Can you talk about those steps and what more did we hear from Pence this weekend?
Yeah, Pence, it was a mostly traditional Republican fare in his speech. He didn't mention Trump by name, certainly didn't say anything about Trump's leadership or anything to commend Trump, his former boss. I think a few times he said something about the Trump-Pence agenda. And then there was this throwaway line that he had, that he said something to the effect of, there are those that want to make this election about the past. And it's hard not to hear him say that and think it's a reference to Trump, who has been rehashing and relitigating 2020 since the day that he lost. And it's the major talking point in all of his speeches and all of his social media postings. And so Mike Pence is not directly attacking his former boss, but he's certainly showing signs that he wants to distance himself, especially since Vice President Pence has his eye on running for president in 2024.
So, Colby, as you know, the president also gave this keynote address at the Turning Point USA Student Action Summit in Tampa, Florida on Saturday. He did talk about inflation, but it felt as if he was talking about it just to essentially mock President Biden. The question, of course, becomes, as he essentially toys with the audience, with his supporters, with the media about whether he will or won't run for the presidency in 2024, how much of his speeches are just a long list of grievances against people he doesn't like, against people like Mitch McConnell, and even people who have sort of been in his corner like Kevin McCarthy, versus actually talking about the issues that matter to Americans?
I would say the majority of his speeches are what you just said. He talked about crazy Nancy Pelosi. At one point, there was a lock her up chant, which is a chant that we used to hear in 2016 about Hillary Clinton and Trump.
That is so 2016.
It's very 2016, but Trump is stuck in these two elections. He will talk to you about how much he won by in 2016 and how much he won by in 2020. And instead of, he'll talk about the border wall. He does a lot with immigration still on the stump. A lot of just kind of red meat to his base that gets them fired up, but no real talk about his plans for the future. Just kind of vague, it would be better in a Trump presidency. If Trump's in the White House, I promise your lives would be better, is kind of how he talks about the future.
Speaking of the former president being in Florida, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes when it comes to Governor Ron DeSantis there and former President Trump?
Well, it certainly seems like Ron DeSantis is planting seeds to run for president in 2024, whether Trump runs or not. Trump still believes that if he throws his name in, it would clear the field and that no one would be able to take him on. But DeSantis has managed to differentiate himself by being more disciplined, kind of having a tight team that doesn't leak the way Trump's aides had leaked all the time. And while also kind of reciting all the MAGA talking points. And so he is like the younger, more polished version of Donald Trump, and the Republicans think that maybe that is the answer to the future for them.
Yeah, it's not just DeSantis, though, Colby, as you know. I mean, you've seen folks like Mike Pompeo going to Iowa, not just Mike Pence. You've got Glenn Youngkin, who some people are talking about. There are some who are even talking about Liz Cheney. Have you heard that, Colby?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Liz Cheney faces her own tough re-election primary in a couple weeks here. I don't know how much, what her support would be in a Republican primary, but it's interesting. You do hear a lot of Republicans, and they say it more privately than publicly, say, I really want to move on. We want to move on from Trump. Not necessarily Trumpism. Like, we can keep talking about the things that Trump talks about, but let's have another leader at the helm. But you're also hearing that behind the scenes with Democrats as well, who say, you know, maybe we need a new leader for the Democratic Party to move the Democratic Party forward. And so what will be interesting is to see if these two men, Trump and Biden, vie to take each other on again, but younger members of their party take them on as well.
Yeah, there was a big Turning Point USA straw poll that was taken over the weekend, Colby, as you know. And the person who seems to have come out on top of that, I know it's Turning Point, but it was, believe it or not, California Governor Gavin Newsom.
Stay tuned.
Gavin Newsom?
Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom, at least as the clear winner of the poll that said which Democrat will be the toughest to beat in 2024, I think is the way the question was phrased.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes, yeah. It would be interesting to see a DeSantis-Newsom showdown. Newsom has already planted the seeds for that. He aired an ad in Florida kind of needling DeSantis, talking about the elimination of rights under their governor. So you definitely see DeSantis or Newsom already thinking about what it would look like to run against DeSantis.
It's still 2022, and we're talking about 2024 as we will be as we get closer and closer to the end of this year. Colby Itkowitz, thank you.
Thank you.